Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 5, Episode 30. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. There's an angle on the Epstein files that I think everyone's missing, and who better to bring it to you, dear listener, than me? And the legacy media is dying right before our very eyes, and many of us don't even see it. Thank you to my longtime listeners. I really do appreciate you. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1. Was Epstein handling the rich and famous, or unknowingly being handled?
People have been waiting a long time to get the information out of the JFK files. They believe that there is this cache of information that's being withheld. And then there's all those secret documents on them, they're aliens. And now we have the Jeffrey Epstein files. I think we collectively have this belief that there's some sort of smoking gun, or in black and white, just incriminating evidence of not only Jeffrey Epstein's nefarious activities, but the fact that these activities were in furtherance of blackmailing other people. I recently heard a critique of why Jeffrey Epstein would want to kill himself in prison. And I had heard many of these critiques before, but this one was so enlightening because it was placed next to a very recent trial that we all just experienced with one Sean Combs. Sean Combs is placed in a very similar situation. He's in the same federal court that Jeffrey Epstein was prosecuted by. He wasn't out gallivanting around. The man was in prison during the course of his trial, and yet he prevailed. Sean Combs didn't kill himself. Sean Combs wasn't in these depths of despair where he said, there's no way out. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. Given who I am, I'm going to have a target on my back. I've got to kill myself. No, he went out and he hired some of the most powerful lawyers in this country to defend him. We all said the same thing about Combs. It's a federal case. Federal prosecutors don't bring cases they can't win. And in the end, Sean Combs was successful for very likely the same reasons if Jeffrey Epstein was to be successful at his trials. And that's the fact that these crimes are old. That this is a lot of stuff that federal prosecutors had a difficult time manufacturing into charges because many of their most powerful charges had already passed via the statute of limitations. So they were being creative in the charges that they could bring, and at least by way of the jury verdict, they weren't able to weave a comprehensive or a cohesive narrative about how what Sean Combs did fit within the parameters, the requirements of those federal charges. What would the federal prosecutors have brought against Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, that's right. It would have been racketeering. It would have been charges under the Mann Act. That is all to say that Jeffrey Epstein would have been in the same mindset, would he not have? I ask you, dear listener, as Sean Combs. He had the money. He had the wherewithal. He was also facing charges similar to those of Sean Combs. There were a lot of these allegations that were decades old. And for the first time, it dawned on me, oh yeah, maybe Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. You see all of the footage that's been released that so-called supports this theory that Jeffrey Epstein, he killed himself, and they don't have cameras right next to the cell that he was in. They have cameras that were on the other side of the SHU, the special housing unit that he was in. There's even footage missing from those tapes. You could see why the Biden administration took the position that they didn't have camera footage outside of Jeffrey Epstein's cell. They don't have camera footage. We now know that. The camera footage that's been provided is from the same special housing unit, but it's not the special housing unit cell that Jeffrey Epstein was housed in. Why do I offer all of this? Is it possible, dear listener, that the Epstein files aren't going to have the damning evidence that we expect them to have, even if they were to be released in their entirety? Yes, I have no doubt that there's a lot of embarrassing information for a lot of powerful people in those files. But is it possible that it's not going to have the smoking gun that many of us want to believe is in there. And that's that Jeffrey Epstein was blackmailing these people, and that he may have been blackmailing these people in service of an intelligence agency, namely a foreign intelligence agency, namely Mossad. That's the conspiracy theory, is it not? That Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence asset, very likely for Mossad, and that his ascension, his meteoric rise to power, was not coincidental. It was all part of this ruse so that this person could get ingratiated into the halls of power in the United States, whether that be political or social. And he could not so much collect intelligence on these people, but he could get into their inner, darkest, deepest sexual fantasies and record them and have that be used as leverage for this intelligence agency, this foreign power, so that these American luminaries would always be obedient to the wishes of Mossad or of Israel. If you want to play in that conspiracy theory, so be it. But let me offer this to you, dear listener, that might change your mind, if not whether Epstein was an asset of an intelligence agency, whether that be the Mossad or CIA, but whether or not he knew it. And if that's the case, the Epstein files may be less of a smoking gun as to what that blackmail or that intelligence gathering function was, but simply a piece to the puzzle that would lead one to the handlers of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not saying I buy into this conspiracy theory, but follow me here, dear listener. Why would Jeffrey Epstein kill himself if he was self-aware that he was a Mossad asset? He had already used a get-out-of-jail-free card in Miami. And let me flip this script on you. Let's look at this from below instead of above. If he were a Mossad asset, why would he be killed in jail? If it were known in that agency, and let's say it's the CIA, if he were a CIA asset, why would he be killed in jail? Well, Patrick, of course, they were afraid that he was going to tell the authorities that he was a Mossad asset or he was a CIA asset. I hate to break it to you folks, but if that were the case, he would have already told the authorities that he was an asset in order to leverage his getting out of jail. Remember, he was attacked in prison by an inmate. This is not a man that was familiar with physical violence. When he was attacked by his cellmate, prior to being put in that solitary cell, you don't think that would have scared him into revealing anything and everything that he could in order to avoid being in jail one more day? Let me offer this alternate theory, which would explain why someone would want to kill Jeffrey Epstein and why the Epstein files don't have the smoking gun in them that we all think that they do. I have never worked for an intelligence agency. I am no spy master, but I've watched enough of those television shows and read enough of the books that the best assets for any intelligence agency don't realize that they're working for an intelligence agency. Let me repeat that so you understand the force of what I'm saying to you. The best assets for an intelligence agency do not realize that they are assets for an intelligence agency. Let me paint this picture for you of one Jeffrey Epstein in the early 1980s. He goes from teaching into working into finance. He gets a little coin in his pocket and he starts making the rounds in social circles where an older guy fraternizes with a younger girl. And that may lead him into other social circles with regard to modeling, beauty pageants. The man may not be a billionaire, but he's got two nickels to rub together. He's willing to throw around money. There is a large population of women that love that. A few introductions later, and he's now managing money for some of the richest people on the planet, namely Leslie Wexner, the Victoria's Secret founder. Now, we know that many of these billionaires have strong ties to the state of Israel. So assuming in our conspiracy theory that it is Mossad, that's the foreign agency that was quote unquote running Jeffrey Epstein, did Epstein ever have to know that the things that he was doing with high profile people were being recorded or were being circulated back to these intelligence agents or intelligence services? What level of complicity would Jeffrey Epstein need to have in order to be an asset for one of these intelligence agencies? Several journalists that have been following the Epstein story have been clamoring for some governmental agency to follow the money. They're not as concerned with the release of the Epstein files as they are with the fact that there appears to be these large money trails that led to Epstein that no one seems to be tracking, or to the extent that they are tracking it or have tracked it, it's not being made public. We're all human. We want the salacious details, but there's a possibility those salacious details don't exist, and that what we have here is just a few puzzle pieces that would lead to the people that were running Jeffrey Epstein. The money is the trail that would lead to the people that had direct contacts or direct access to some of these intelligence agencies. And we never think that someone who is a multi-billionaire would have direct access to these intelligence agencies. But think about it, dear listener. Who better to have these contacts than these billionaires? Think back to Iran-Contra and why that happened. The CIA wanted money for a covert operation in Nicaragua, and Congress said, no, we're not giving it to you. And basically, the executive branch of the U.S. government said, fuck you, we'll go raise the money ourselves. If you are running these intelligence operations, you don't want your budget contingent on a legislative body, a bureaucratic body. As an intelligence agency, you may not want your operations to be even well known within the agency because of how nefarious or how dark, let's say, using people who are predisposed to having sex with young girls to lure in powerful people around the world who want to have sex with young girls, so you could then leverage that fact over them in politics, in governmental decisions. How many spy agencies are going to sign off for a budget on that? Now, on the other hand, if you had contacts with one, if not more, billionaires who were ideologically committed to whatever cause you had, the cause du jour, and were willing to fund it, that may be where the smoking gun lies, dear listener. Let's dive back into the conspiracy theory. If in fact Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad asset, was a CIA asset, would he have known about it? Would he have known, rather, enough information that he could have given to authorities, that he could have given to the media, where other parties could have started to put together the puzzle pieces and realize that Jeffrey Epstein, in some capacity, may have been an intelligent dupe? Jeffrey Epstein wasn't a dumb guy, but he may have been dumb to the fact that many of the people that he thought were his allies, they were using him. Do you think Jeffrey Epstein installed the security system that he had in his home on his private island? Do you think that he personally went in and installed all the cameras and did all the wiring? Completely hypothetical scenario. What if one of his billionaire friends said, you know what, use this security firm. They are my preferred provider. I use them for everything, and they're excellent. And of course, Epstein agrees. And that security firm has access to all of the information that's recorded on that security system. If Epstein was in fact murdered in his prison cell, it would be to protect the fact that he had enough information to implicate intelligence agencies, not that he flat out knew that he was an intelligence asset, because if he did know, he would have already leveraged that for a better deal, a get out of jail free card again, would he not have? I'm speaking for myself, but I believe I speak for all of us in that we have this frame of mind where what did Jeffrey Epstein know about all these billionaires that he could leverage against them so that they would give him all this money? But what if it's the exact opposite? What if it's the fact that these billionaires had information about who Jeffrey Epstein was and propped that man up so that he could mingle among the rich and famous, the political and social elites, and implicate them in the types of things that Jeffrey Epstein was known for doing? What if Epstein wasn't running these billionaires or a billionaire, a billionaire or billionaires were running Jeffrey Epstein? What if this billionaire or billionaires were running Jeffrey Epstein for a foreign intelligence service like Mossad or a domestic intelligence service, the CIA? We need to follow the money, dear listener. To the extent that you are concerned about the Epstein files, Jeffrey Epstein himself, as much as you want to be concerned with his sexual preferences, his sexual predilections, it's the money. At the root of the truth of this matter is that money trail. And if it is never pursued, if it never sees the light of day, we'll never know the truth.
Act 2, Legacy Media is dying in front of our faces.
The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was recently canceled, and there's been a lot of bluster, puffery about how this was a political decision and Trump was taking credit on social media for getting Stephen Colbert fired. That's all absolute nonsense. Total bullshit. The idea being batted around is that CBS wanted to jettison Stephen Colbert because he had been critical of Donald Trump, so they cancel that show in order to facilitate a pending merger between CBS and I believe the company is called Skydance. This little pseudo-conspiracy theory goes along the lines of the FCC can block these mergers. Trump is petty enough that he would go to his FCC and would prevent the merger from taking place because CBS has a property, an asset, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where the host of that property, that asset, was critical of Trump and the Trump administration. Note, I used in that recitation petty. It would be a petty move for someone in the government to dangle the proverbial sword of Damocles over that deal because of the political affiliation of one of the hosts of one of the television programs with things being said critical of the president or anyone in his administration. CBS canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert for one reason and one reason alone, money. And it has to do with the merger. It's not the politics of the merger. It's not the politics of Stephen Colbert. It's money. This next piece of news, this next tidbit, is illustrative of the fact that the legacy media is dying right before our eyes. Have you heard of an outlet called Puck News? P-U-C-K News. Puck News. This outlet, Puck News, reports that The Late Show with Stephen Colbert last year lost $40 million. $40 million on one television program. There's no telling how much money CBS is losing, how much ABC or NBC are losing. No one watches legacy media anymore. But for one program, one asset, one property to lose $40 million, it's shocking to the conscience that anyone would think that that program would continue. So there's no telling how much money that program lost 2 years ago or 3 years ago. For those of us that are older, David Letterman started that television program and it was a staple of late night TV for decades. The television landscape has dramatically changed. Everything has to be bite-sized. It has to be snippeted so it can go on social media. And Colbert did not have any type of presence, any real following on social media. When you look at the decision to cancel that television show, it makes perfect sense in light of the fact that it lost $40 million. If it had been a political move, if CBS wanted to placate the current administration in order to increase its chances that this merger was going to be approved by the FCC, they simply would have fired Colbert. They wouldn't have canceled the entire program. CBS is acknowledging it's a huge mea culpa. Late night television is a loss leader. We're losing our ass on this. They absolutely canceled that television program. There's no announcement as to what's going to replace it. CBS was dumping a fucking loser in light of this merger with Skydance, because why, if you're acquiring this asset, this CBS, or if it's a merger, and as Skydance you're contributing the majority of the capital into the merger, why would you want to keep an asset on the books that turns out to be a major liability? one that's lost potentially over the last 3 or 4 years close to $100 million. I would imagine that the majority of the money that was lost on that television program was in the contract that they had with Stephen Colbert. He's probably making 8, 10, 12, maybe even $15 million a year. And that could be conservative. He might be making $20 million a year. The television contracts that these late night hosts sign have been made completely antiquated in light of the social media presence of TikTok and Instagram, Snapchat and Twitter, or X, if that's what you like to call it. Consider this as well. An outlet called Puck News that I had never heard of before was the one that dropped this scoop. It demonstrates the decentralized, the fractured nature of entertainment and of news, which is making a company like CBS a dinosaur and is making it a target for an acquisition. They're calling it a merger, but really it's an acquisition. Contemporaneous to this story was the story that Fox Sports 1, FS1, fired a whole slew of people and canceled a bunch of their television shows. As I've stated before, no one's watching ESPN. If no one is watching ESPN, no one is sure as hell watching FS1. These legacy media outlets are dying. FS1 is doing what ESPN already did. ESPN hired Pat McAfee, brought his show onto their network. FS1 is now hiring or bringing on Barstool Sports. Maybe these efforts will work, maybe they won't, but no one is watching legacy media anymore. We're watching it die before our very eyes. That may be disappointing to some of you, but in my mind, good riddance. Particularly when it comes to the sports television and sports television personalities, that buffoonery, I'm glad to see it go the way of the dodo. Given some of the box office projections for the latest Hollywood movies, that industry is on its way out as well. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.